Welcome to the ISF podcast from the Information Security Forum, featuring timely conversations, practical insights, and resources for global cybersecurity professionals. I'm your host, Tavia Gilbert. In today's conversation, ISF CEO Steve Durbin sits down with Michelle Seiler Tucker, speaker, author, and CEO of the New Orleans-based Seiler Tucker, which specializes in mergers and acquisitions. Michelle speaks with Steve about her newest book, Exit Rich, the 6P Method to Sell Your Business for a Huge Profit, which releases today. They discuss tips on selling a business at a profit, the current state of mergers and acquisitions in the COVID economy, the role of cybersecurity in M&A, and more. Here's Steve.
Lovely that you could take the time, Michelle. Thank you very much indeed. Now, in the show notes that I've got here, it says that your firm has sold over 1,000 companies across almost every vertical. So plenty for us to talk to there in terms of experience of mergers, acquisitions. And that really is the topic of this conversation we're having today. But before we get into that in some detail, you've obviously got a great deal of experience in this space. What was the unique draw for you? What made you decide to specialize in this particular line?
Yep. So that was kind of a bunch of different events that happened. I never woke up and said, I'm going to sell companies. I knew I was always an entrepreneur. I've owned many different businesses in many different verticals. And I knew that from a very young age that I would always be an entrepreneur. I would not be one to work for someone, mainly because I don't like to be told what to do. Like that's my biggest pet peeve. But, my clients tell me what to do all the time. And I ended up going to work for Xerox for a year. And I left Xerox and transitioned into franchise sales, franchise development, franchise consulting. I became equity partner in some different franchisors' business. And then I kept finding myself saying no because buyers kept asking me for existing businesses to buy. And I only had franchises.
Right.
So at one point I said, gosh, it's congruent. Why I should be selling businesses too. And so that's how I opened up my M&A firm by about 21 years ago. And started selling companies, first, small companies, and then very quickly graduated to selling companies $10 million and up. And that's our sweet spot, businesses $10 million and up. We do sell smaller businesses from time to time. But then I really learned what Steve Forbes says is true in America, that 8 out of 10 companies will not sell. Mm-hmm. 8 out of 10. And so I said, gosh, if I don't fix them and grow them and put them on a build to sell model, I'm going to starve to death. And that's really how I came up with what I do now, which is specialize in buying, selling, fixing, growing businesses. I buy companies and flip them. I partner with business owners, investing my time, expertise, money, etc., in which to put them on a build to sell program.
Fantastic. And certainly, we're still, for some countries anyway, in the midst of the pandemic, for others beginning to emerge from it. Mergers and acquisitions took a bit of a hit early on in the pandemic, but been recovering quite nicely, I think, over the last quarter or so. Mm-hmm. What's the general business outlook for mergers and acquisitions at the moment?
The outlook is very positive. There's been a tremendous, millions, probably in the billions now of transactions that have taken place over the last quarter. And, for us, it's great as well. We have so many buyers. And there's actually, more buyers for good businesses than there are good businesses to buy. So we don't really have a shortage of buyers, especially if you have an EBITDA of over $1 million. EBITDA is earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization. There are more buyers for those businesses that have an EBITDA of $1 million, $2 million, $3 million and up versus those businesses that are smaller that have an EBITDA of under $1 million.
Right. And is that right the way across the world or just in the United States? Or give us a bit of sort of geographic perspective.
Yeah, I don't know about the whole world, but that's the United States. That's what's taking place in the United States and Canada.
Right.
And we do deals all over the U.S. and Canada, and we've done some deals in Trinidad and Colombia.
Right. Okay. One of the questions I know that I get asked all the time from people who are looking to maybe grow companies, they've started it, particularly in the cyberspace, they understand that there's plenty of growth opportunity there. One of the things they ask me is, how do I maximize value? Now, you've done a lot of that. I think, again, in some of the notes here that I've got, you close nearly 90% of all written offers. On average, you get 20 to 40% above asking price. So how could somebody maximize value?
So I'm going to give you, it's going to be a long answer. So if you want to maximize value, number one, you have to build a business, not a job.
Right.
Most entrepreneurs have built, a glorified job that they go to work at every day versus a business that actually works for them. The number one reason that businesses don't sell is, number one, business owners don't think about selling until they have to due to a catastrophic event occurring. Rather, that's internal or external. Internal being health issues, partner disputes, divorce, death. External is this pandemic. That's the worst time to sell your business. You want to sell your business when your business is in its prime and when it's doing well, not when you're facing a catastrophic event. The number two reason that businesses don't sell and they don't maximize value, because the owner is the business. I take the owner out of the business, there is no business. I'll give you two examples. I had a sweet little old lady call me a couple months ago, and her husband dropped dead from a heart attack. He had been in business for 45 years, left her with a mountain of debt, and she knew nothing about the business and nothing about the financials. And I started asking her different questions. He had a construction company, no employees, all subcontractors, and all the data was in his head. So when he died, the business died. There is nothing to sell. I have a dentist that came to me in business for 50 years, wants to sell. One dentist, two dental hygienists. I told him you have to stay on for 2 to 3 years. Otherwise, no one's going to buy it, and it's going to be very difficult to maximize value. And he says, I'm not staying. I said, well, if you're not staying, you're not selling, because your patients are going to leave the minute you leave. So to maximize value, the first is people. You don't build a business, Steve. You build people, and people build the business for you and with you. Right. So entrepreneurs have to focus on their strengths, hire their weaknesses. You got to stop trying to do everything. Put the right people in the right seats and ask the who question. Who opens the doors? Who deals with customer service, legal, marketing, manufacturing, logistics, environmental? The clue, Steve, is you should never be next to the who, because you want to build a business that can run without you. The second is your product, your industry, your service. If your industry is thriving and not dying, we can maximize value. But so many industries, Steve, right now are dying because of the pandemic. If you're in an industry like a restaurant or something that's dying, you need to ask yourself 3 transformational questions. Amazon did this back in the 90s. They asked themselves, what business are we in? Mm-hmm. And every business owner should stop what they're doing and ask themselves, what business am I in?
Right.
And Amazon said, we sell books. We're in a book selling business. We don't write books, we sell books. Number 2, what do we do really, really well, better than everybody else? And Amazon said, we do fulfillment better than anyone else. So business owners have to really take stock of what their core competencies are, what their USP is, their unique selling proposition, and really figure out, what do you do better than everybody else? And then number 3, the most obvious question, the most important question is, what business should we be in? Amazon said we should be in fulfillment business. We shouldn't just be fulfilling book orders. We should fulfill everything, which is what Amazon is doing. Those 3 simple questions, as easy as they sound, transformed Amazon from a small bookseller to a multi-billion-dollar worldwide conglomerate that they are today. So you also can't have one profit center. Mm-hmm. If you're in the restaurant industry, don't have all your eggs in that restaurant business. Sell some, sauces, sell some cookbooks, whatever. You need to have congruent revenue streams. So the third is processes, and processes are huge, because processes will make or break your company.
Right.
If you don't have the right processes in place, if they're not efficient, if they're not productive, they're going to cost you money. Plus, if they're not designed with the customer experience in mind, you're not going to create happy clients. Have you ever dealt with a company where you're trying to get your problem resolved and you've had to talk to maybe 2 people, 3 people, 10 different people to get your problem resolved and it's still not resolved? That's because the processes were not designed with the customer experience in mind. So, and then you need to make sure they're well documented. You got policy and procedure manuals, SOP checklist, employee handbooks, and non-compete. All of these are so important to run a company that's going to make you money, and it's going to be sustainable and scalable.
Tell me a little bit about digital assets, because of course that's a really tough one for a lot of people, right? They understand physical stuff, but the digital asset can have an immense value as well, right?
Well, it can. Are you talking about things you sell on your website?
Yeah, but also intellectual property and the way that you've perhaps, come up with some of these ways of reaching out to potential customers and existing customers.
Yeah, proprietary assets. This is the number one value driver. Companies that sell in America, now I'm just talking about America, I don't know about the rest of the world, but companies that have an EBITDA of under $1 million typically will sell for 1 to 4 times multiple. Companies that are over $1 million in EBITDA go 4, 5, and up.
Right.
Proprietary assets will get you a much higher multiple on your business. There's 6 pillars to proprietary. Number 1 is branding. So the more well branded you are, the more I can sell your company for, as long as your brand is relevant in the mind of the consumers. Is anybody paying any money for Blockbuster? Of course not.
Right.
But the most valuable brand in the world, number 1, is Apple. Apple's worth $259 billion. That's just for the brand. That's not including the cash flow, assets, inventory, real estate, or the FF&E. That's just the brand alone. So build your brand so you can exit rich. The other thing that's really valuable, you call them digital assets, trademarks and patents. You got to trademark your company name. But here's the mistake that people make in the United States. They go to the state like California and they get a state trademark, but they never check the federal database to make sure that company name's available.
Right.
So they could be operating in business 5, 10, 15 years, and all of a sudden receive a cease and desist letter in the mail, and they have to stop using that company name. So you want to make sure you get that federal trademark. We're right now selling a business that specializes in selling products to grocery store chains. And each product has a federal trademark. They have 12 different federal trademarks for 12 different products. A strategic competitor will pay a lot of money for that.
Right.
Same thing with patents. If you've ever watched Shark Tank, what does every investor always ask? Do you have a patent on that? Do you have a patent pending? Their offer is always contingent upon you having a patent. And, we sold a business for $18 million that wasn't really making any money, but they had 18 patents.
Right.
The other thing is the contracts, manufacturing contracts, vendor contracts, distribution, franchisor, any type of exclusive contracts. The most valuable contracts are your client contracts, especially if they have a subscription model with recurring revenue. But the mistake that business owners make is they don't have the transferability clause in their contracts. 99.9% of all sales are asset sales, not stock sales. So you want to make sure you have transferability in your contract. And then digital assets, databases are huge. Facebook paid $19 billion for WhatsApp. Mm-hmm. And WhatsApp was hemorrhaging money. But WhatsApp had a synergy that Facebook was willing to pay for, and that was they had 1 billion users. Also, celebrity endorsements, radio personality endorsements, because they can only endorse one diet company at a time or one skincare at a time. And then your digital assets as far as positioning. Those e-commerce businesses, we sell a lot of e-commerce businesses that have the top 3 spots on Wayfair, Etsy, Amazon, eBay. These are the digital assets that can get you from a 5 to an 8 to 9 or 10 multiple.
One of the other things that you mentioned right when you began talking about maximizing value was the owner staying in the business. Now, I have to say, I've got mixed views on this. I've seen that work really well in some of the companies that I've bought. I've seen it work really badly in some of the companies that I've bought. But it always comes up, doesn't it? This issue of talent retention. Do you keep the owner? Do you let the owner go? And it applies to the management teams and others as well that are responsible for the business. What's your best advice in that space?
Well, when I say keep the owner on, what I mean is if the business is dependent upon the owner, you have to keep the owner on for a transition period. Otherwise, you'll lose the clients and could lose market share of the business. So it really depends upon if the business runs without you. That's why I went into all the different things you need to do from the people aspect, making sure you have the right people in the right spot and asking a who question. If the business runs without the owner, then you don't need to keep the owner. I mean, we're selling a pretty large produce company right now. And the buyer said, Michelle, there's no way this company's going to run without this owner. We'll buy 80% of the company and the owner can retain 20% plus their salary and benefits. So it really depends. I mean, it depends upon how involved that owner is. The goal objective for all business owners should be to create a business that runs without you. And then you don't have to necessarily stay. But
Right.
if the business is dependent upon you, you're going to have to stay for a period of time. And I would prefer an owner to stay with an equity position rather than just staying with benefits and salary, because that way they've got a little bit of equity in the company, a little bit of say so, even though there won't be majority.
Absolutely. Let me ask you a question, though, about some of the critical talent. I mean, the security industry, we have something like a 3 million person shortfall from a workforce standpoint. So there is not a shortage of opportunities for critical talent, for smart talent. What are some of the ways that you've seen where you can effectively keep critical talent? Because when a company is acquired or merges, things change, right? And people may not want to stay.
Yeah. So the best way to keep the critical talent is to have an exit monetary plan where the current business owner is going to give so much money at the and this happens a lot where the business owner says, you know what, this team has been with me for a long time, this management team. I'm going to make sure that they get paid at the sale of the business. So that's one way. And sometimes they'll say, you get this much if you stay this period of time. A lot of times people don't change jobs. They change people, they leave people. So as long as the new buyer comes in and are decent to work for, and they don't really go in and change things that are not broken, then the talent's not going to leave. But I've seen owners come in and, pay them a certain amount over a period of time. I've seen buyers come in and offer them a percentage to stay on. Maybe 5%, 10%, something like that.
And sort of allied to that, business partnerships, so supply chain, joint ventures, alliances. Again, we're talking about significant change very often when we go through a process such as the one we're talking about here. What advice have you got for keeping those guys on side as well? So say my business is dependent on a third party. How do I keep that third party on side? Do I inform them through the process? Do I, tell us a little bit about that.
I don't recommend the business owner ever informing anybody through a process because, the business might not sell. All kinds of things can happen. I don't recommend that you tell your employees, that you tell your vendors. I don't really recommend that you tell anybody. Is maybe a high level executive like a CFO, or somebody like that is the only person I recommend that you tell. People don't like change. People get nervous that the new owner is going to come in and terminate them. So they're going to start looking for another position. So you should never do that. When the business closes, then the owner should set up a meeting with the new buyers and just to ensure a smooth transition. But, again, as long as the business owner doesn't come in and change things, again, people don't leave their jobs. They leave people because they don't like the way people are treating them, right?
Right.
And if you're going to come in and change the compensation level that you're giving a JV, then of course, if it's going to be worse, then they're going to leave. If you improve it, then they're going to stay. And you can even improve it by a small percentage. But I think this is a misconception that so many people have, is that buyers come in and, upset the apple cart and get rid of everybody and do all that. They really don't. I mean, most buyers want to make sure that the business is going to remain the same, if not improve. And the last thing they want is employees to get up and leave.
Let's talk now about integration. So we've talked a lot about the pure acquisition process. I want to switch it a little bit to more about the merger. Very often mergers go well, but there's also a percentage that don't go quite so well. What are the sorts of tips? What are the sorts of things you've seen to allow integration for success in a merger type acquisition?
Sure. There are professionals that specialize in bridging that gap, marrying that culture together from one company to the one that they're acquiring. There are culture specialists that do that. There's also PR firms that handle the messaging to make sure that the messaging is accurate and on point, and to make sure that what's getting out to the public about the merger is exactly what the acquirer wants it to be. So I would suggest, hiring a professional. I'm not a culture professional or a PR firm, but there are different culture specialists that we've worked with in the past, along with PR firms that we've worked with in the past, to control the messaging and make sure the two cultures blend. And then, there's some stuff you can do beforehand too, to really get an idea if this is a culture that's going to blend with your existing operation. And it depends. I mean, are those two companies really merging, or is there a company in Detroit, Michigan, and then they're acquiring another company in Texas, and maybe the two of them are not going to be operating together though?
Yeah, absolutely right. And, I'd add into that as well that it isn't just about the people, although for me, where I've seen mergers go particularly badly wrong, it has been, as you rightly point out, due to this culture clash that hasn't been managed appropriately. But a lot of people listening to this will be immediately thinking about the whole issue of cyber and how you merge, technology together. And very often, of course, sadly, the right level of due diligence doesn't take place to make sure that that's a success too. Any comments on that?
You're absolutely right. I think you just hit the nail on the head, because in due diligence, they're looking at everything else, right?
Yeah.
They're looking at the employee mix, they're looking at the client mix, they're looking at contracts, they're looking at financials, but they're not really looking at security, cybersecurity. They really aren't. That's an item that gets missed. Now, it's on my due diligence checklist that I make sure my team has and the buy side and sell side have, but many of those people get that wrong. So I think it definitely needs to be a checkbox on due diligence checklist. The specialists need to look at that and make sure you have the appropriate cybersecurity in place. And if not, hire the professionals to specialize in that.
Absolutely. That's been fascinating walking through that with you, Michelle. Now, you've written your third book, Exit Rich. That's the most recent one. Tell us a bit about that. Presumably you walk through some of the things we've just been talking about, right?
I absolutely do. So I'll tell you a little bit about it. Sharon Lecter is my co-author. She is also a CPA, financial literacy expert. So she writes the Mentor's Corner after every chapter. And then Kevin Harrington, the original Shark on Shark Tank, writes the foreword. So Exit Rich is really not just about selling a business. It's actually the most important thing is how to build a business that is sustainable, a business that will run without you, a business that you can scale. And when you're ready, you will actually have a sellable asset. So Exit Rich is just really all about, number one, planning your exit from the beginning of starting or buying a business, not waiting until a catastrophic event has occurred. Because business owners treat their business as their baby, not as the most valuable asset they have. And if you follow the steps in Exit Rich and build your GPS exit model from day one of buying or starting your business, you will have a sustainable, scalable business. It also covers valuations. It covers the 5 types of buyers, what the non-negotiables are for each type of the 5 types of buyers, how to negotiate, how to package your business for sale, how to create a bidding war and bring, 5, 10, 15 LOIs to the sale of your business and how to close.
Right. So everything that you need really to sell a business successfully.
And not just sell a business, but everything you need to have a sustainable, scalable, and profitable business, because the business landscape has flip-flopped in the US. When I wrote my first book, Sell Your Business for More Than It's Worth in 2013, I realized that 85 to 95% of all startups were going out of business, right? We know that. When I wrote Exit Rich in 2019, 2020, did the exact same research and realized that the business landscape has changed dramatically. Now only 30% of startups go out of business. However, out of 27.6 million companies in the United States, those businesses that have been in business 10 years or longer, 70% of those companies are going out of business. That's before the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
So think about that. It used to be, if you've been in business 5, 6, 7, 10 years, you're in business forever, right?
Right.
No, 70% are going out of business. And that's because business owners stop innovating. So Exit Rich is all about how to build a business that's sustainable, that's not going to go out of business, and really sellable when you're ready.
And if people want to buy this book, they can go to your website, right? And they can download.
They can go to exitrichbook.com. They can buy the book. We will email them the digital download immediately so they can start reading it today. We will ship the hardcover to their doorstep for no additional charge to anyone in the United States. Outside the United States, there's additional shipping cost. And then we will give them a lifetime membership into the Exit Rich Book Club, where there's video content of me doing training, plus documents. So documents to run your business and sell your business, sample non-competes, employee handbooks, policy and procedure manuals, org charts, sample LOIs, letter of intents, purchase agreements, due diligence, checklist, sample closing docs. All of these documents are there for your review and your immediate download. And then plus we give you a 30-day membership into Club CEOs, which is an entrepreneur mastermind where we teach business owners how to build that sustainable, scalable business. So when they're ready, they too can exit rich.
Fantastic. So lots of really useful, helpful pieces of advice that's not just in the book, but also backed up then on the site with the ability to download.
Right.
Michelle, it's been really interesting talking to you. Lots of hints, lots of tips. And I think particularly useful just walking people through that process and demystifying some of those things. So thank you very much indeed for taking the time. And I look forward to reading the book.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you so much for having me. It's been my absolute pleasure.
Thanks so much to our guest this week, Michelle Seiler Tucker. We'll be back in the next episode for Steve's conversation with technology entrepreneur and business builder Matt Blumberg, the author of new release Startup CXO, a field guide to scaling up your company's critical functions and teams. Here's a preview of that conversation.
That section headline is privacy, but I think if you read it, there's a lot of security kind of woven into it.
Yeah, there is. Yeah.
And, the reason we called that out in particular is that it's becoming an increasingly important executive function. Show me the company right now that doesn't have data coursing through its veins. that doesn't have to worry about breaches and hacks and now ransomware on top of it. It's not just tech companies, it's any company. So I consider that to be a really, really important and relatively standalone function.
We'll be back with the full interview in a week. In the meantime, will you consider writing a short review of the ISF podcast? Reviews are a big help when we're trying to reach new listeners, so if you do have a moment, we would be very grateful for your time. And we're wondering if there's a topic or a question that you'd like us to cover in a future episode. If there is, you can let us know by getting in touch at securityforum.org, and while you're there, we invite you to explore our catalog of past video and podcast episodes. You can also find ISF's research, practical tools, and guidance related to discussions like these at the website. Find us on LinkedIn by searching CEO Steve Durbin or Security Forum. Follow our audio feed wherever you get your podcasts, and you'll never miss an episode. The ISF podcast is produced by Talkbox and Tavia Gilbert. Music by Alexander Filipiak. Associate producer Katie Flood. Mix and master by Brian Barney. Thanks for listening.